Hello friends and welcome to another TNT. Thank you very much for dropping in. It's the last time you'll see this for a few weeks because I'm starting today to take a journey south via Singapore, and I'll give you some reports on the way down because there's plenty to talk about in regards to travel, in regards to the performance of various airlines at the moment, so we'll certainly be checking that out as we go. Now, when I'm down there, I'll certainly be trying to do the program, but depending on the Wi-Fi, depending on where I am, depending on what sort of plan I can get on an Australian SIM card when I get there, will depend on how I go getting the program out each day. Very soon, I'll also, at the end of the program, I'll address a lot of the outrage from comments and reporting yesterday about the two CNN reporters, one reporter, one cameraman, who were caught climbing over a fence after improperly covering the massacre up in Isan last Thursday. So I'll get to that a little bit later. I'll address the immediate story though as we get stuck into today's program, and Thai PBS World saying that two CNN reporters have been deported from Thailand for having incorrect visas, not blacklisted. Rather interesting choice of photo there, I would have thought, from CNN. I'm not really sure why they particularly decided to focus in on Anna Corin's legs, but there you go. The Thai PBS story says two CNN reporters who entered the crime scene at the childcare centre to cover the mass killings last Thursday are scheduled to depart from Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi airport to Hong Kong. Indeed, they left the country yesterday. There is a CNN headquarters in Hong Kong, so I imagine that's where they both came from. So the second paragraph, Thai immigration sources say that the two journalists, Australian Anna Corin and Briton Daniel Hodge, were deported because they held the wrong visas. Tourist visas, it says. Well, that's not quite correct. They didn't actually have tourist visas. Both Australians and British people are able to get visa exemption coming into Thailand. They would have been given a 45-day stamp to stay in Thailand. It's not a tourist visa, it's no visa at all. And as I mentioned yesterday, the possibility to actually go through the process of applying for a proper work permit to work in Thailand as journalists or media would have probably taken weeks. And so that's why they probably did what they did. And in fact, journalists around the world all do the same thing when they're covering these sort of big international stories that are, relatively urgent. Further to the story, the sources say that the two reporters will not be blacklisted and they can return to work in Thailand, provided they obtain the appropriate visas, and they can apply for work permits. So I'll be addressing some of the commentary on yesterday's reporting later in the program, but let's get to some other stories. And Thai PBS World reporting that a poll shows most Thais are unable to earn enough to make ends meet. It's a Suan Dusat poll from 1,067 people, and the report shows that 54.5% of correspondents, I think they mean respondents, say their income is not enough to cover their expenses, while 82.9% say fuel prices and travel expenses are too high. Most of the respondents, 80.3%, say it's because everything is expensive. 74.7% say it's because more people are out of work and have no income. And 70.4% say they earn the same amount of money but are unable to afford less necessary things. Down the bottom there, 77% of the people surveyed don't, however, expect the government to be able to solve the poverty issue, and 59% think the government will not be able to resolve high commodity prices. So the issues of job security and inflation are certainly kicking in Thailand. So we'll be following that story as we expect probably those sort of surveys to keep showing similar results in the months to come. To the next story, and just slightly out of Thailand, the Malaysian Prime Minister has dissolved the parliament for snap elections, and the King says he's disappointed at political developments. And from Kuala Lumpur, the Prime Minister of Malaysia announced in a special televised address yesterday, paving the way for snap polls nearly a year ahead of the deadline for a general election. and the dissolution was widely expected to happen this week. The second paragraph saying that Malaysia's constitutional monarch has absolute discretion on whether to consent to a request to dissolve the legislature, after which voters must go to the ballot within 60 days. So an election is expected by early November to avoid clashing with the year-end monsoon. Well, you certainly wouldn't want those voters going out and getting their feet wet, would you? So we should also thank our sponsor, 5 Star Marine. There are some very pretty islands around Phuket, and you can get into one of these boats. They've got 10 of these Lucas vessels and some new ones coming online, and you can visit an island just like this, or even this. And there's a link to the 5 Star Marine website under this video. This is TNT, it's Tuesday, and in a bit more follow-up to last Thursday's massacre story, some, I suppose, what you would call fallout, opposition seeking special parliamentary session for debate on Thailand's drug plague. The opposition leaders say they'll seek an extraordinary parliamentary session for an urgent debate on drug abuse and trafficking, which they blamed for the Nong Bua Lompu massacre. A certain amount of political risk, I think, in this particular stance. And then the second paragraph saying that the opposition leaders discussed Thailand's drug problem, which they say requires urgent attention. Then further to that story, also from The Nation, Prime Minister Prayut responds to nursery killings with crackdown on drugs, rehab for addicts. And he's come up with a whole list of things that he wants urgent attention to. So at least I suppose you could say the politicians are taking some sort of action. Whether anything actually transpires, of course, will yet to be seen. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has ordered the police and the Interior Ministry to accelerate action against drug trafficking, and the Public Health Ministry to set up proper rehabilitation facilities for addicts. Well, again, like I said the other day, aren't some of these things already being done or had been done in the past? Apparently not. The third paragraph saying there that they want the Interior Ministry and other state agencies to launch frequent, comprehensive crackdown on traffickers to rebuild public confidence. Well, we know we get these show drug busts quite often. Probably only 1 or 2% of the actual drugs coming down from the Golden Triangle ever get intercepted. The vast majority of it gets through. But there are these show drug busts where they proudly show piles of kilograms of illicit drugs and they display it and get the press in to take photos. But really, this is just a show and hardly a dent in the actual drug production. Further on in that story, it says that he's also calling for regular checks for potential users in communities, schools, entertainment venues and factories. Again, you'd like to think that they were already conducting some sort of regular testing or at least surveillance on a lot of these important communities. And in the second paragraph there, the Prime Minister asking the National Police Chief to ensure his subordinates at all levels are free of drugs and take strict criminal and disciplinary action if any officer is found guilty. Down the bottom there is a hotline, 1386, if you do have any tip-offs in regards to drug trafficking. Thank you for dropping in on today's TNT program. We do this 5 days a week and I'm very grateful for your time and for your support. If you do get a moment to subscribe to the channel, that would be appreciated too. To our next story, and a very sad story, although with a happy ending, an Israeli girl, 6 years old, survives a box jellyfish sting. This happened in the province of Suratani. A young girl from Israel stung by a box jellyfish. She was resuscitated after being airlifted from Kopangan to Suratani Hospital, and she was aged 6 years and 11 months. The young girl was reported to be out of danger yesterday, no longer needing a ventilator, and there is either the box jellyfish or a box jellyfish. It could indeed be a file photo. Box jellyfish are a bit of an issue this time of the year, sort of August until the end of the year in the Gulf of Thailand, and it seems particularly around those sort of islands, that trio of islands of Koh Phangan, Koh Tao and Koh Samui in the Gulf of Thailand. Now, when I'm saying it's a problem, we're talking of maybe one or so incidents a year. Not a big problem, but certainly these box jellyfish can be dangerous. And apparently, particularly for Israeli people. And I go back to the 30th of August last year, an Israeli boy dies from a box jellyfish sting on Koh Phangan, and it says that it happened at the Hat Rin Beach in front of the Seaview Sunrise Lodging House. Noting that Hat Rin Beach is where they hold the monthly full moon party. The only comment I can really make about this is that a lot of the southern beaches in Thailand are patrolled, and the lifeguards are trained in first aid and in regards to these sort of jellyfish stings. Now, box jellyfish may be a bit of a problem in the Gulf of Thailand on the other side of the Malay Peninsula, the Andaman coast as we call it. The other problem is jellyfish of a different type. In Australia, we used to call them blue bottles. They're sort of also called stingers. I can't remember the scientific name for them, but they're sort of, well, here's a picture of them. That sort of helps. And they've got these blue tentacles. I remember I was swimming with a friend down at Naihan Beach, or about 10 years ago. And we were standing on the shore and they were saying, oh, are these jellyfish a problem here in Thailand? I said, look, I've been swimming here for years. I've never had a single problem. As I was slowly wading out into the water, the first wave hit me and I got stung right across the chest by one of these blue bottles. And it does hurt. I mean, they're not going to kill you, whereas the box jellyfish for younger people and sick people can actually be fatally dangerous, but the blue bottles will certainly sting. So just some things to be aware of. I mean, these aren't a huge problem, and 99.9% of people that go swimming in Thailand don't encounter a jellyfish. And just remember, these jellyfish are not sort of seeing you and going, ah, human, and coming and trying to attack you. It doesn't work like that. We just unfortunately swim into where they happen to be dangling their tentacles. To another story, and this also some follow-up from what happened last week. A senior cop who laughed during the massacre interview loses his PR post, and Coconuts Bangkok saying that a senior police officer was removed from his role as spokesperson after he laughed insensitively during an interview. He's been removed from the job. Down the bottom there, Paysan was heard laughing repeatedly after a reporter asked if the death toll from the mass shooting, which was then 32, included the gunman. His explanation there on the second paragraph, Paysan laughed before responding over more chuckles. When you asked if the gunman was included, I immediately had to think if it's included. I'm sorry, I got this number from my supervisor. I forgot to ask if the number included the gunman. A lot of people online saying his laughter was inappropriate and insensitive. Look, I think a lot of people approach stress in different ways. I don't think he was probably being either inappropriate or insensitive, or it may have appeared so, but I think he was probably quite stressed. He didn't quite have all the information. It was a very fluid situation, and that was just his way of responding. Not making excuses for him, but I'm imagining that's probably what happened. And from the Pattaya News, traditional buffalo race wraps up yesterday with numerous attendees in Chonburi. This story is quite funny. The historic traditional buffalo race, which has been hosted in Chonburi from October the 1st to the 9th on 2022, officially came to a close. Further down there, it says the race took place on an old school long dirt track. I think they probably just need to buy a few commas there. In front of the Chonburi City Hall. As expected, the annual event attracted hundreds of spectators, both domestic and international alike, who cramped the stands, all hundreds of them, to watch as buffaloes mounted by one contender, really, sped through the air to hit the finish line. So flying bulls mounted by one contender on that track, which is an old school long dirt track. Proofreader.com. Any more on this? Oh, there is more. There we are. We've got some photos of the flying bulls in full flight. Look at them go. And the buffaloes, it says, which in the old times were used for agricultural purposes, were trained and placed on special diets prior to the competition to ensure they were in prime health. This is why the buffaloes seen in the pictures look so athletic and nimble. That's what I was thinking when I was looking at those buffaloes. I was thinking, athletic, nimble. So that story there from the Pattaya News. Oh dear, there's more. The buffalo race was held in Chonburi for the 151st time over decades. I'm not sure if that's 151 decades, but anyway, that story there from the Pattaya News. Just finishing today with a bit of flood coverage and more Chao Phraya floods this week. The surge in the discharge rates to wreak havoc. So that story says that a large volume of water from the north that's making its way down to the Central Plains provinces is set to wreak further havoc on communities living along the Chao Phraya River, including those in Bangkok. So I think a lot of those floodwaters coming out of the north and central plains of Thailand is taking a bit longer than people were thinking to get down to the capital. And the story says that fears are mounting that the flood situation in central Thailand from Chainat down to Ayutthaya and onto Bangkok is set to experience more woes. And down the bottom on Monday morning, that's yesterday, levels in the Chao Phraya and Noi rivers went up in downstream provinces and overflow hit riverside communities and roads. Meanwhile, the Bangkok governor revealed yesterday that water levels in Bangkok may subside due to forecasts of less rain this week, with floods in some areas likely to quickly subside. So as we mentioned last week, the worst thing that could have happened is for high tides in the Gulf of Thailand, the waters arriving in the Chao Phraya adjacent to Bangkok, and heavy rains in the capital all at the same time. But it looks like those three things aren't going to be occurring all at the same time, and Bangkok is ready for when those floodwaters do eventually arrive. Now, rather than just riffing here about some of the comments made over the past 24 hours from our Monday TNT program regarding CNN, I'll try and put something a bit more cogent together today and respond accordingly. But I do think that there's been a lot of, overreaction. I mean, if people actually think that CNN are sitting in their headquarters in Atlanta and thinking of really bad, nasty ways to cover the story in Thailand, well, you need your head read. These two people were acting independently. They were just sent down from the Hong Kong Bureau to cover the story, and clearly they covered it quite inappropriately. But to think that CNN, who are now backtracking very quickly over this story and over the coverage, had anything to do with organising them climbing over walls and infiltrating crime scenes, they would have known nothing about it and are now, they've issued official apologies. But we'll speak more about that in a video later today. But I do thank you for dropping in. Thanks for your time. I do appreciate it. And you can subscribe to the channel, or indeed, as some people said in the comment section, you can also unsubscribe from the channel. But from all of us here, Dina over there, thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.